Okay, let's unpack this brutalist interior design. You know that feeling when you're scrolling, maybe looking at interiors, all soft textures, gentle curves, and then bang,
Yeah.
you hit a space that's just stark, concrete, strong angles, almost monumental forms. It's quite a shift, right?
Definitely a contrast.
Yeah.
But there's something, I don't know, really compelling about it.
Yes. That boldness, that kind of raw, unashamed honesty of the materials, the confidence, maybe?
That's a good word for it. Confidence in the structure itself.
Exactly. And that's really the intriguing core of brutalism in interiors. And that's what we want to get into today.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this design language, which, really came from huge, often public buildings after World War II.
Right, those big concrete structures.
How that's filtered down into our homes, our most personal spaces. Makes you wonder what it is about those, well, unembellished forms and raw materials that still clicks with people.
Totally. So the mission for this deep dive is to go beyond just like recognizing the look of brutalism inside. We want to understand the thinking behind it.
The philosophy.
Yeah, the philosophy. What makes this approach stick around? We're going to look closely at how those architectural ideas translate into making a home. And our guide here is a really insightful article from Mindful Living.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
It does a great job laying out the key elements, distinguishing it from styles it gets confused with, and, crucially, how you might actually bring it into your own space.
Well, at its heart, I think brutalism in interior design is really a celebration of materials, just as they are.
In their purest form.
Pretty much. The name itself, from beton brut.
Raw concrete.
Exactly, raw concrete. That tells you a lot. It signals this commitment to showing materials in their basic, untouched state.
So it's prioritizing the structure, the material itself, maybe even a bit over, say, conventional ideas of coziness.
Sometimes, yeah. But it's not about being deliberately cold, or at least it shouldn't be.
Okay, interesting. So not trying to be uncomfortable.
Not at all, no. When it's done well, there's a real intentionality there. You're looking at a specific palette.
Right.
Raw concrete, exposed steel, often matte, not shiny, unpolished stone.
Right.
And the colors are quite deliberate, too. Lots of grays, blacks, whites, and those, muted, desaturated neutrals.
And the actual stuff in the room. Furniture, fixtures.
Tends to have a real visual weight, a sense of substance, you could say.
So how is this different from just, like, minimalism? Because you could have a minimalist room with few colors, but it might not feel brutalist.
That's a really key distinction, actually. Brutalism has this inherent boldness. It's not just about less, it's about making a strong statement.
How so?
Through things like sharp angles, those monolithic forms we mentioned earlier, and a very conscious play between different, often contrasting textures, every piece feels like it's there for a reason, contributing to this striking overall impact.
Okay. So if you were walking into a room trying to spot if it has that brutalist vibe, what are the main giveaways?
Well, often the most immediate thing is exposed concrete, walls, floors, maybe even countertops.
Right.
And it's usually not like perfectly smooth concrete. The little variations, the color shifts, the imperfections from how it was formed, that's all part of the look. It's embraced.
So the material gets to tell its own story almost. What else?
You'll often see industrial type metal finishes. Things like blackened steel, maybe brushed aluminum, sometimes oxidized copper. But the key is usually a lack of high polish.
No, less shiny brass or gold.
Much less likely, yeah. Those tend to feel a bit softer, more decorative. Brutalism leans towards cleaner, stronger geometric shapes, really clear visual lines defining the space.
And the furniture. Does it follow suit?
Absolutely. Furniture often feels very sculptural, almost like pieces in a gallery. They're functional, of course, but they're also major visual elements themselves, not just background noise.
Got it. Okay, so just to quickly recap those key identifiers. We're talking prominent concrete, maybe exposed structural bits like beams or pipes. Furniture with sharp, geometric, often kind of blocky shapes. Mostly monochromatic or very desaturated color scheme. A real lack of clutter, minimal decoration.
Surfaces kept clear.
Yeah, clear surfaces, and maybe dramatic lighting that creates strong shadows.
Definitely. Lighting is key. No, this is where people sometimes get confused thinking about industrial style.
Right, because they both use raw materials, exposed elements. I can totally see the overlap.
For sure, they share some ingredients.
So what's the fundamental difference? How do they feel different, or what are they trying to do?
I think the core difference is in the emotional feel and the design intent. Industrial style often brings in warmth and a sense of history through aged things like reclaimed wood, old factory lights, weathered brick.
There's a story there of repurposing.
Exactly, a narrative of the past, whereas brutalism feels much more present, even future-facing sometimes.
Okay.
It's more about the purity of the form, the immediate impact of the material, not really referencing history in the same way.
So, industrial might soften things with plants or warmer lights.
Right. Well, brutalism tends to maintain that more stark, powerful presence. Think about a cool, restored factory loft, lots of history and character, versus a very contemporary, almost gallery-like design space. That's kind of the vibe difference.
That really clarifies it.
Yeah.
And the specific materials probably differ too, right? Even if both use metal.
Precisely. Brutalism really leans into concrete, glass, and those matte metals in their, unadulterated state. Industrial uses metal too, but also brings in lots of brick, distressed wood, vintage-feeling elements.
The colors follow that.
Yeah, generally. Brutalism stays pretty restricted, cool-toned. Industrial often has warmer neutrals, maybe hints of rust or aged colors mixed in.
That's super helpful. The article we used actually had a great little table summarizing this. It said brutalism feels bold, monumental, contemporary, while industrial is more weathered, historical, utilitarian materials. Concrete, glass, matte metals for brutalism versus brick, reclaimed wood, iron, aged metals for industrial.
Yeah, that sums it up well.
Furniture. Sculptural, geometric statements in brutalism versus functional, maybe vintage-inspired, mixed-era stuff in industrial.
Right.
And colors. Minimal grayscale, dominant for brutalism versus neutral with warmer undertones for industrial.
Exactly. It's a useful comparison. Now, for listeners who are maybe intrigued by this but thinking, whoa, a whole concrete room feels like a bit much?
Yeah, like maybe not ready to commit to the full bunker vibe.
Yeah, right. What are some ways to sort of dip your toe in? To bring in elements without it feeling overwhelming?
That's a really practical point because jumping all in might be intimidating. The cool thing about any style is adapting it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And often, starting small is the best way. Experiment, see what clicks. You might be surprised how much impact one well-chosen piece can have.
The author of that Windful Living piece actually mentioned starting their own brutalist journey with just a concrete side table.
See, perfect example. It's about introducing pieces that capture the essence, but in a manageable way. Lets you live with it first.
So give us some specifics. What are some concrete ways? Sorry, couldn't resist to start.
Okay. Well, a concrete effects statement wall is one way. You don't need actual concrete.
Yeah.
There are amazing paints and finishes now that mimic the look and texture really well.
Oh, like those textured paints. The article mentioned Portola paints.
Exactly. Companies like that. They do finishes that have that minimalist, textured feel. It gives you the vibe without, pouring concrete.
Smart.
Yeah.
What about furniture for a more gradual approach?
Look for pieces with those strong, clean geometric lines we talked about, and using the right materials. Maybe a really substantial concrete coffee table.
Okay.
Or a low-profile sofa, but one with really sharp, defined angles. Brands like CB2 or Blue Dot were mentioned as having accessible pieces that capture some of that feeling.
And lighting. We keep saying how important it is.
Huge. Think about architectural lighting fixtures. Matte black metal, maybe raw concrete pendants. A single, striking pendant light with a strong geometric shape can instantly inject that brutalist edge, even if the rest of the room is fairly traditional.
And it helps create those shadows, too.
Right. The article had a good list of smaller swaks, too, like changing picture frames to simple metal or concrete ones.
Yeah.
Using unglazed ceramic pieces, angular ones instead of fussy decorative bowls. Switching hardware handles, taps to matte black.
Little things.
Yeah, little things add up. Replacing fabric lampshades with metal or concrete pendants. Even large-scale abstract art with strong geometric shapes. Those smaller touches can definitely shift the feel.
Okay, let's dig into the colors and materials a bit more. It's key to getting that impactful look, right?
Absolutely. It's more than just painting everything gray, though gray is definitely central.
So it's a limited range, but used thoughtfully.
Exactly. Deliberately restrained. The idea is to create depth through texture and subtle tonal shifts, not loads of different colors. The foundation is usually those concrete grays from light ash all the way to deep charcoal.
And besides gray.
Blacks, whites, and then those very desaturated neutrals. Think like a muted olive green, a dusty brown, maybe a subdued navy. The key is mutedness, nothing too bright or vibrant.
Why was so controlled?
It really allows the materials themselves, the concrete texture, the metal finish, and the architectural shapes to be the stars of the show. The form and texture become the main event, not the color.
Makes sense. And materials beyond concrete.
Well, concrete is huge, obviously,
Yeah.
structurally, furniture, decor, but glass is important too.
It's right contrast.
Yeah, contrast and lightness. And like we've said, it really affects how light plays in the space, creating those dramatic shadows off the textured surfaces.
What about softness? Do textiles fit in? How do you use them without, ruining the vibe?
Oh, textiles are crucial. You need that layer of softness and contrast to make it livable. Think natural fibers, canvas, linen, wool.
Okay.
Always in solid neutral colors, though. Imagine a rough concrete wall next to a simple sofa upholstered in, say, a heavy linen. That juxtaposition is really interesting and stops it feeling too harsh.
So natural textures are key.
Yeah, focus on authentic, natural materials, maybe with a visible weave. Avoid anything too slick or synthetic. It's about that thoughtful interplay.
So if someone's actually out shopping, trying to furnish a space with this brutalist idea in mind, what should they look for in, say, sofas?
Prioritize those strong architectural shapes. Low-slung, squared-off edges, not a lot of puffy cushioning visible. And stick to neutral upholstery canvas, leather, wool. Definitely avoid patterns or bright colors here.
And tables, storage units.
Look for that feeling of substance, visual weight. Chunky concrete coffee tables are classic. Monolithic console tables, blocky shelving,
Material.
blackened steel, raw concrete, maybe unfinished stone. The article pointed to brands like Menu, Fruma, even Destruction in Design for this kind of more specialist stuff.
And lighting remains sculptural.
Totally. Think of the light fixture itself as an art piece. Geometric shapes in concrete, blackened metal, maybe matte ceramics, floor lamps with those articulated arms, pendants with architectural forms. Allied Maker and In Common With were mentioned as good sources.
What about stuff on the walls? What kind of art fits?
You could go for actual brutalist-inspired metal sculptures, large-scale abstract art, especially with strong geometric elements, even some global pieces if they share that raw material feel. And architectural photography, especially high contrast, black and white, works really well.
Right. The article had that quick list, too. Auto for clean Danish lines, CB2 for accessible stuff, Frema again, and even Etsy for vintage or handmade brutalist sculptures.
Yeah, lots of options if you know what you're looking for. Now, here's an interesting thing. Despite sometimes looking, well, severe,
Stark, yeah.
brutalism in interiors can actually feel surprisingly comfortable. What do you think leads to that? Because it seems counterintuitive.
That is interesting. My first thought isn't necessarily cozy when I see a big concrete wall.
I think part of the comfort comes from the lack of visual noise, the absence of clutter, of too much decoration. There can be a real sense of calm in that simplicity.
Okay, like mental breathing room.
Exactly. And there's that honesty we talked about. The space isn't pretending. It's just authentic materials and forms. And that can feel quite grounding, quite secure.
I could see that. A different kind of comfort, maybe. More about order and purpose than, plushness.
Precisely. And crucially, making it livable comes back to that thoughtful contrast we mentioned. That hard concrete wall feels way more inviting next to a deep pile wool rug.
Right.
A heavy stone table feels less intimidating with a simple ceramic vase on it. Even the most minimal brutalist space needs those touches of tactile and visual contrast to feel welcoming, not just austere.
And the lighting again, softening the edges.
Absolutely vital. Harsh overhead light is the enemy here. It just makes everything feel cold, almost institutional. Layering is key: floor lamps, table lamps, wall lights, creating pools of softer light, more nuanced shadows. That transforms the feel without losing the brutalist core.
The author mentioned that bringing brutalist pieces into their home actually made them way more deliberate about every design choice. Like each new thing really had to justify its presence.
And there's a satisfaction in that, isn't there? Living in a space that feels truly considered purposeful, that's a form of comfort, too.
Yeah, definitely.
Ultimately, look, brutalism in interior design isn't for everyone. And maybe that's part of its appeal, you know?
It's distinctive.
It really is. It's for people who genuinely appreciate the beauty in the materials themselves, who see elegance and structure rather than just decoration, and who want to create spaces that feel honest and authentic, not just trendy.
So whether you're just thinking about adding a couple of concrete planters or you're ready to go full on with steel and raw surfaces, brutalism does offer this rare sense of authenticity in design.
Well said. So to wrap up our deep dive here, brutalism inside your home is really about celebrating raw, honest materials, embracing the beauty of structure, and making bold statements with form. It's a pretty refreshing and solid alternative to design trends that come and go.
And thinking about that authenticity, here's something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Take a moment to really look at the spaces you live in every day. Think about the materials, the structure underneath it all. How do those elements communicate honesty or purpose? What might you discover? What kind of authenticity could be revealed if you mentally stripped away the unnecessary layers?